So I'm kind of coming to you from the point of view of a psychologist who knows a little bit about the development process and a lot about how to do research to find out how people actually do think and how they do things rather than how I might anticipate that they do things. Because one of the things that I learned very early on, as I was trying to mess around with this software and web development kind of stuff, was that a lot of people weren't paying attention to how human beings actually function. And so that was causing some problems in the products that they were making. So let me see if I can start with the question that Nellie put up, and I'm not really sure. And Nellie, we may need to refine your question a little bit. But first of all, just plain understanding how companies are doing UX, one of the things that I will tell you about it is there is no standard way that people are doing things. It's just like development. There are obviously different kinds of languages that are used in development that create some of the changes. But even when we look at people technically doing the same kind of thing with the same languages, we find that people approach these quite differently. And so some of the developers, for example, learn to code on their own. Maybe they watched some videos or took some online class and those kinds of things. But they don't necessarily have degrees in development, and they don't necessarily have formal education. Same thing is going to be true of UX people, that increasingly there are people with formal degrees that lead you to an understanding of what we're going to call user experience, but those degrees may have very, very different names. So the courses that I taught when I was at the university were called informatics. And they were human computer interaction design things. So they were, in some cases, kind of front end development kinds of things. But as you start trying to figure out what the roles are and what you're supposed to do, there are a lot of different ways that people describe UX designers these days. And let me tell you, they don't always mean the same thing. So one of the problems that we run into when we're trying to talk about what is user experience and what is the job of a user experience professional like, I want to go to a different slide. This is basically, if you look at the job descriptions, what most people seem to be talking about. In other words, they want this amazing person who has a background in psychology, sociology, anthropology, software development, social science research, and 10 to 20 years of experience. And very often, first of all, those people are very, very few behind, if they actually exist at all. But trying to come up with some kind of understanding of what a UX job really is, well, here's some job requirements. So notice that this one has immediately asking for 3 years of experience in doing research. In other words, this is not making assumptions that you're a developer. It's making an assumption that you know how to do social science kinds of research that have been adapted to help in the design of software because they help us understand people and how people think about things. So here is a job that is assuming, first of all, you've had experience in doing this and that you can do all of the formal things that's required. So you can plan the research, you can basically have an understanding of statistics so that you understand what the metrics are and how they work and what you can measure and what you can't measure and how you measure it and how you talk about the measurements. Notice that part of it is making the assumption that you're not working on a single product, but maybe you're working on multiple products within the company. So you're kind of coming in and doing some research as needed, or maybe at the beginning of some processes. And it's talking a lot about communication, which is really actually a big UX skill, is communicating with people, because you have to help people understand how other people do things. And project management skills, yeah. So qualitative and quantitative research. Now, those are basically talking about the difference between things like you send out a survey and you have responses from 3,000 people, and you now can predict what people in general are going to do relative to the thing you asked them about. Kind of. That's quantitative. Qualitative research is where you do things like you watch people. You go to their workplace and you see how they do their work before you try to build software that helps them do their job, to make sure that you really understand what needs to be done. So that qualitative research is really about taking you out of yourself and predicting what you would want because of who you are, and understanding who the people are who actually use this and what they need to do with it. So one of the things you're going to hear UX people say all the time, not about me, it's about the people who use it. So one of the important things here, obviously, is we want to find out what people do in a way that we can make sense out of it and then interpret that in a design for the software that we're going to build. So notice that this set of job requirements was basically for a researcher. Okay, here's another one. 3 years industry experience leading product focus, UX research, bachelor's degree in something like human computer interaction. Notice the last one didn't care whether you had a degree, they just cared if you knew how to do stuff, right? Broad knowledge of all facets of the user experience discipline. And let me tell you, that's going to take more than 3 years. Ability to select research methods, yep. Qualitative and quantitative research, yep. Notice it's specifying some particular kinds of research. Communicating findings, ooh, communication, again, excellent communication skills to present findings, problem solve, and negotiate. Yeah, one of the things they don't tell you is this is a very, very political environment, and you're constantly negotiating for what you're doing and what you're not doing. And ability to assess and anticipate needs, which means you have to know who you're designing for, and you have to have a way of learning about what they need. Time management, organizational skills. Notice that this one, they want a portfolio that demonstrates that you can do this research. In other words, to apply, you have to be able to give them evidence of research projects, not just I went to school and took these classes. So obviously, this particular job is in a university or some kind of higher education, because they're working with people who are in higher education or people in related businesses. So knowledge of lean and agile software development practices. So all of a sudden, and instead of just being about doing research on what people need in this software, you also need to be able to communicate clearly with developers who are using an agile process in their development, which is basically, you don't just design the thing and give it to them. Basically, the design is done in short segments over a long period of time to get to what we hope is going to be a better outcome. But different job description, all of a sudden it's asking you to know a lot about the development process. Now we go to this one. These just happen to be taken from, descriptions for jobs. Notice they're still saying about 3 years of experience. In other words, they really don't expect you to have a lot of experience, but they expect you to have some. Information architecture and design skills. Other folks didn't mention that. In other words, the expectation is that you know how to design software and you know how to use the tools, wireframing and prototyping tools, that are typically used to communicate those designs to other people. And in this case, content management systems, this company probably has a great, big, huge website that has lots of information on it. That's why they want an information architect, and they want someone who is experienced in dealing with huge amounts of information that usually are done in content management systems. Influencing and negotiation. Again, they're talking about communication skills. Writing for the web, which is not like writing for the college writing classes. This is not writing fiction or essays or academic articles. It's writing for ordinary people in most places. And now they're saying knowledge of web standards, not just how to build it, but kind of knowing what best practices are. And those best practices for not only usability, making it easy for people to use, but best practices in terms of designing for people who are not people in the ordinary for whatever reason. So we're looking at accessibility. Notice this is asking for advanced degrees. In other words, not a bachelor's degree in web design, graphic design, or interactive design. Notice this has nothing to do with psychology. Now kind of we're talking art. We're looking for visual designers or graphic designers who have this understanding of software and understanding of human behavior. You see how we get to that unicorn thing? And understandings of basic web-based stuff. So in terms of the kinds of jobs that are out there and the kinds of things that people do, there's not one answer. So one of the things that you're going to hear UX people say a lot is, it depends. It depends on what the company is, depends on what the company's history is. It depends on, are they primarily a software development company, or are they a company who hires software developers to create internal programs that they use to do something else? In other words, who the company is and what they need done is going to be a major determinant in what is needed and what is expected in a UX position. So it's kind of like asking, what do I need to do to be an athlete? And if you're going to be a football player, you probably have different requirements than if you're going to be a tennis player, or maybe a swimmer or a mountain climber. And so UX is kind of the same way. It's a very, very large category that you can approach in a whole bunch of different ways, because there are different jobs that need different kinds of things done. So, for example, a lot of companies really are focusing on the research part. We need to know who our users are, what they really need, what's going to work well for them, and then we need somebody who can implement that in the design of the software. And other companies are basically looking for somebody who can make the website pretty. And they think they want a UX person, and then when a UX person who's trained in research comes in, they go, "You want us to what? You want us, you want to talk to the people that use our software? We just need you to tell us what color the buttons are." So there are lots of different ways of doing this. I would say the first thing to think about is, what are your existing skills? And how can you build on those, because now you know some different things that you didn't know before. So if your existing skills are in the development process, you may want to look at, what kinds of things do I need to be able to do while I'm developing something, for example, to make the software more accessible to people in general. So you might decide to focus on some of the accessibility stuff, particularly if you're working for an organization that has to comply with the federal laws to make things accessible, which means almost everybody. So some people kind of try to ignore it. It doesn't do them well in the long run. So you might look in that direction. If you're artistic and you're a decent graphic designer and you kind of know what looks good, you may want to move more in the idea of being in that niche of creating those graphic designs. But now you probably need to know things about human beings that they don't teach in art classes. Like, how do you design for people who are colorblind? How do you design for people who are easily confused? How do you design for people who, if you make things flash, they have seizures? So there's a lot of stuff about just what it is to be human that they don't teach you in art class. So maybe you want to go in that direction. What I did, because my training was in psychology, I was interested in, what do you need to do to make products, software products particularly, but I don't care, it doesn't have to be software. I figure user experience has to do with things like rearranging the drawers in your kitchen, because you want to do that to make things easier overall. So, you can find the thing you want, and it's where it should be relative to where you need it. So that becomes really a psychological thing, which is what psychologists are always trying to do, which is to understand people that are not like them. So if you really want to be in that position of kind of even figuring out what this phone app should be for the company, or if we should build one at all, based on understanding who the people are who might use it, and what do they need, and what do they understand. And very often you find that they don't think about things the same way that you do, but you can still design stuff well, even if that's the case. So, um, Nellie, coaching opportunities, a lot of it's going to depend on what direction you want to go and where you're starting from. And to a certain extent, the HFI courses were put together with the assumption that the people coming to these classes knew that designing for usable products was important. It was a good thing, and it was essential to making products successful. So that general why are you even there was what the courses were designed to do. Is they were designed to give you a taste of all of the pieces that person with the 10 years experience would know, but obviously not everything, because it's only what you can do in a couple of weeks. But to give you that breadth of overview, so then you can go in and you can say, well, I know how to do this, so I'm going to go someplace where I can use my skills. Plus, now I know where it's going to help, but I also know when I need to bring somebody else in to get me some information I don't have. So that's kind of what that was designed for. So I think there are lots of ways for becoming a better UX designer. I mentioned the HFI courses just because that's kind of why I'm here, because I teach those courses. But you can do a lot of things, and one of them is you hang out with people who do this stuff. You go to local meetups and you meet people, you read stuff online, you read books about UX, maybe you take a workshop of some kind that gives you a little piece of it. And as you learn more, you become better. But then the other part of that is you have to take what you've learned and you have to put it to use. In other words, there's a reason that all of these job ads were asking for experience. Because it's one thing to have read about something in a book. It's yet another thing to actually have done it. And the first time that you do a real interview, the chances are very good you will make a mess of it. But you will get better, particularly if you have someone to help you. So another way is if you get a job on a team where there are UX people who are part of the team. Now, that may not be something you have a lot of control over, but if you're looking for jobs, that's one thing to look for. Are there people with these skills, and what do they contribute to the processes that you would be involved in? So that's another way. Okay, so related to that, who are the best UX designers, development background versus psychology background? I think the best UX designers are people who understand that they can't design for themselves. So where you learn that isn't important. For most real UX work, you don't have to be a developer. I think you have to understand enough about development to be able to speak the language, to communicate reasonably accurately, and ask good questions. I think it doesn't hurt if you've had to do a little bit of development. But even though a lot of the job requirements will have a list of the languages that you need to know, those companies really don't want a UX person. What they want is a front-end developer who's going to design the things that people see and build that. Now, in a lot of cases, particularly in small companies, that's the best you get for UX, is you get somebody who is a developer, understands basic design of screens and software, and knows that they should try to make stuff that people can use. But that's not necessarily UX, because UX really does involve the process you need to go through to learn more, not just use what's in your head, but to learn from the people that are going to use the product. So I would say that in terms of walking in the door with good understanding, you're better off with a background in social sciences, psychology, anthropology, sociology, probably any one of those, because you understand how to go about learning about people. And that's going to be more likely to get you in the right direction. Now, I know a lot of people, the Usability Professionals Association is a very interesting organization. It's international, and I used to love going to the meetings. Obviously didn't go last year, and I'm not going this year, but it's really fun because here is a group of hundreds, sometimes thousands of people who are interested in user experience. Some of them are software designers, some of them design physical products, some of them design services. And you sit down at lunch and there'll be a bunch of people sitting around the table, and you'll have somebody who's a graphic artist who is now designing software. And you talk to the next person, and the next person is an engineer who basically designs mechanical things or physical products of some kind. Well, and then there's a person over here who was trained as a technical writer. And so that person is good at putting in the content that's needed and then describing how the software works and training people. And then you'll have somebody else that has maybe that psychology background. And so they understand things that aren't going to work or are going to work just because of physiologically and learning wise how we function as people. And then you get somebody else who's got an entirely different background that they've come into it. You know, they could be an artist. Basically, whatever part of the product you're interested in working on, there probably is a user experience focus that kind of goes in that direction. So a lot of what you're coming with a background of depends on what do you want to do? You know, do you want to write software? Do you want to design service processes? You want a different background for those two things. For example, if you want to design one of those content management sites, good background is library science, because those librarians, they know how to categorize things. So am I getting in the right direction at all for you, Nellie? Try. You got some questions. Okay, I'm going to come back to a couple of your questions, Nellie, but I want to look a little bit, since we're kind of talking about it, in terms of the research, design, build kind of process. So we're going to answer that question. So I'm going to mark off the ones that I think I've kind of answered. So when you're thinking about designing a product. Probably the first step you have to go through is you have to figure out what this product is. You have to figure out who needs it and what those people are like. And you need to figure out what does this product do that's going to help them with something they need. Is that going to get them some information they need? Is it going to support a task they need to do? So you really need to start knowing who you're designing for and why they need this thing. And if your first design is, well, it's going to have blue buttons on a gray background, you're likely to end up with a mess somewhere along the line and taking more time than you really wanted. Because sometimes, if you do even a little bit of research, you find out that people don't need the product you're thinking about because they're already getting what you were going to provide for them very effectively from somewhere else. And they aren't even going to use this thing, even if you make it really good for them. So early on, you really need to have that underlying understanding of the basics behind what this thing is. Then you can start picking apart what do people actually need it to do. That starts directing you toward what the design is going to be. So if the phone application is to get you information about tax law for your business, first of all, we better get somebody involved that really knows the tax law and can help us make that information clear, right? See why that's why technical writers are sometimes UX people, because they help clarify information. So now we're starting to think about what that content looks like. And until you know that, you don't know, well, does it all fit on one screen, or do I have to think about this as a series of screens? Do I want to break the information down, or do I want long screens that people are going to scroll through? In other words, until you really know what's going on, you don't know what to design and how to design it. So there has to be some of that research up front. Then you start putting together what you know into what do I think based on what I've learned, not based on what I want, but based on what I've learned, what do I think a good design would be? And you test it. You don't put a lot of effort in it. You don't build it and release it. I know there's this thing about minimum viable product and we're just going to put it out there and see what happens. That's a good way to waste a lot of money and to kill your reputation. You at least have to have a design that's going to do something in a way that people want. And the best way to find out is to come up with even a sketch of it and showing it to people and saying, if you had this, what would you do with it? And if they can't figure it out, you know you've got a problem before you built it. You really need to know what the design should be, at least on a very basic level, before you start building it, which means that a lot of this work needs to be done not a day before, but maybe even sometimes months before for a big project where you're building something brand new. But if you're not building something brand new, and if it's just, a little phone app and it's not that big a deal, well, then maybe a couple of weeks will be enough to get the basics that help you figure out what you want to do next. But yeah, and you're absolutely right. The negotiation about the developers are sitting there and they're going, you can just see their little fingers are getting nervous because they need the work and they don't like sitting around and doing nothing, particularly when they know that there's work ahead and they're going to have a lot of time pressure. They want to get going on it. And so you've got to get things to them early on in the process that they can do without absolutely making such a mess that everything has to be redone. You really kind of need to know what you're building before you start building it. So that kind of addresses that. Okay, related to that, let me talk about the HFI certificates for a minute. So, just a second. I've got the information here. It's just a matter of, that's what, okay. So I said that basically HFI put together these courses to give people that broad overview that they would need if they were beginning. But the other thing we found out is it tends to be a pretty good review for people who have been in the field for a while too. I know you can't read all of this little detail, but you can go on the HFI website and read all of the details. But basically the idea here is you spend a couple of days learning basic psychology and physiology, stuff that you probably didn't learn about human beings and how they function, even if you took an intro psych class. Because I know when I taught intro psych classes, there wasn't enough of this there to get people where they would need to work. But it's just a couple of days to get you that basic stuff that you should have learned in college, but you didn't. And then there's 3 days basically talking about process, talking about things that you really should be doing rather than the CEO calls you in the week before the product's going to be released and says, you know, I heard about this UX stuff and it's supposed to make things work better. Can you UX our new product before we release it next week? And by the way, the answer is no, you can't, even though you probably can find some things that will make it fail if it has some real problems. But this second step is really, second little mini course, 3 days, is really talking about how do you think through a basic strategy, which is going to help you communicate. Remember, the communication stuff was really important. And it also talks about how to do basic research. So not just how to send out a good survey, though you'd be better off having had a good survey than nothing at all. But if you send out a bad survey, you may actually know less than you thought you knew to begin with. So it talks about different kinds of research and how you prioritize them. What you do if you're in a hurry and you don't have a lot of budget, and what you do if you've got 6 months plan. So that talks about that getting ready. The next 3 days are spent basically talking about all of the little elements on a website and when you should use them and why, including why a lot of people use them badly. And then the last 2 days is basically teaching you how to test your rough designs. So that set of courses is basically 10 days. Is that the equivalent of college degree in HDI? No. It's closer to the equivalent of a semester at most. But most people, even though they may ask for a degree in preparation, that's usually going to be for a little bit more advanced position. The kinds of things where people are really open to somebody coming in kind of at a bottom level, they're going to be less concerned about a master's degree. They're going to be more concerned that you can demonstrate maybe through a portfolio what you know. So yeah, we don't need the master's degree, uh, but it's not going to help. It's not going to hurt. It often, particularly if you're going in a role that you may want to move up into a supervisory position. Um, yeah. Okay. How do you collaborate with marketing? I always tell my classes that they need a good friend in the marketing department. Remember, this is about communication. You don't want to fight with the marketing department because they have access to two things you need. They have access to information about the customers, keeping in mind the customers may not be the people using your product. They are the people who are buying it. They have access to that information and they have access to budget. So they've got good data and you want it. So yeah, you collaborate in part with them by flattering them and saying, oh, you know so much, you're so smart. Can you please show me all this wonderful stuff to help us with our designs? And once you build a relationship, then you can do things like you can begin to ask that some of the analytics look for things that they haven't been looking for because they have more to do with how people use it rather than whether or not people will buy it. So this is about relationships. Make friends. Make friends. HFI courses, hands-on versus theoretical. And can I call myself a UX designer? Let me tell you, you're going to be more a UX designer than most people out there who are trying to get jobs calling themselves UX designers. I know people that I think their UX designer title is more a matter that they know that people use it than anything about them. So I would say, yeah, you can call yourself that, but also don't present that you can do things that you can't do yet. In other words, you really should try to get some hands-on stuff. So are the courses hands-on or theoretical? We try to have folks do activities where you try out some of the things you're learning about. There is a lot of theoretical stuff. There's a lot of information in these courses, a lot. But there also is some time to try them out. Okay, let me get back to Nellie because we're almost out of time. And so, Nellie, what language, if you're thinking development languages, most cases not relevant. We are what I would consider language agnostic. We don't necessarily believe that there is one language that's better and outshines all others. Most of the time, if you're working with developers, you're working with whatever everybody else is using in your group or whatever the software was written in that you're trying to fix. And so it isn't so much about how do you build it as what do you build. And I think that that's more important than the focus. Now, this last one I think is great. How do you analyze data? Do you rely on information obtained from the business analyst? Most good business analysts I know are very, very good at getting the kind of information that UX people typically are interested in. In other words, they're really good at getting requirements and clarifying the requirements and making it so that the development team understands what the requirements are. And many of them are increasingly using very, very similar tools to get that information that UX people would use. So I've had quite a few business analysts in the classes, and they're saying, well, yeah, a lot of this is stuff I already do. I already go out and try to interview some of the people who are using the product. I already ask questions, so there's a lot of stuff there that's really similar. I think the difference really is then where the focus comes in that the business analyst is very seldom asked to design the product. And very often the person who was hired as a UX person, particularly if they have some graphic design background, they will be asked to put together what the design looks like and to understand how it works and why it's working well. So, yeah, and basically, yes, rely on the business analyst, rely on the marketing person, rely on the engineers who know what the software can and cannot do that's existing based on the language. A lot of what good UX people do is they are communicators and collaborators. They're the folks that pull all this stuff together that make it possible to design a product that people actually can use. Of course, the other part of that is everybody that knows you have a background in this, whenever they have trouble with a piece of software, they will call you and they will say, I had a horrible time using this website, and you should call them and tell them how to fix it. But that's just one of the little side problems with the job. HFI versus Nielsen-Norman. I've talked to some people who have done both. Occasionally, I have somebody in my class that's done the Nielsen-Norman. And they have a lot of similarities. And they also have differences. Now, what those differences are, unless I took the courses, I wouldn't really know. So I don't think it would hurt. There are organizations that basically, when they hire people, they either hire them because they have the human factors certification, or they make you do it once you're hired, because they've found that if everybody on the team has gone through the process from the developers to the business analyst, that it improves communication. And it improves everybody kind of going in the same direction. So quite a few big companies have basically had everybody on their development teams do the classes. So and yeah, when you go there, if you haven't taken them, you will be asked to do them. So I don't know. So we're kind of at the end. The future of UX and AI. One thing, I'm not a futurist. So considering I started doing online courses in the 90s because I thought web-based courses would probably work. Yeah, maybe I'm a little bit of a futurist, but I think increasingly, if you don't have a product that people can use, people won't use it. A great UX designer or practitioner. Oh man, there's so many people out there that are doing a good job in their own little niche, but usually it's not the folks that are bragging about it. It's the people that are just doing good work. I'm not sure I can answer that. I tend to, I grew up in academia where you basically learn from everybody. And so that's kind of the way I think about it. So I can't really answer that question. So anything else I can help anybody with? Yeah, all you have to do is get me talking, and I can talk for an hour. But hopefully you learned a few things that you find useful. And very good luck to all of you in your careers. As I said at the beginning, I think that if you know about this kind of stuff, if you've just got this background in your head, along with everything else you keep in there, it has some real benefits in that it's going to help you, not just in your career, but it's going to help you in your everyday life, because you're going to learn how to pay attention to other people. And that's absolutely critical. And we didn't really talk about the XA certification and the first two courses in that you can take as a unit, what we call the PET courses, Persuasion, Emotion, and Trust. I call those our vaccination courses, because they help you understand how to influence people's behavior. And they also help you to understand how other people are trying to influence your behavior. And they're kind of a vaccination that prevents you from getting persuaded when you don't want to be. So I think the courses have value. If I didn't, I wouldn't take the time to teach them. So I hope to see some of you in class someday. I'm kind of enjoying doing the online classes, though I'll tell you what, the restaurant here just does not compare to being able to go out for lunch and dinner after class. So, good luck to all of you. You take care, and I hope we'll cross paths again someday. If you've got some other questions, I'll hang out for a few minutes. So, Tarina, do you have anything you want to say? She didn't expect me to do that.
Sorry, I was on mute. And I talked and talked and talked. Sorry about that.
Yes,
Guys,
that
what I
happens.
said, what I was saying was, if you guys have any questions about our training courses, please write to me, Taruna, Taruna, at humanfactors.com. We offer our certified usability analyst training every month. So every month we offer all 4 courses, and you can attend them at your pace. There is, we are on GSA schedule, which is our government approved rates. So if anybody has, questions about those particular rates, availing those, I will be happy to share those with you, and happy to give you a discount if you are considering attending. So reach out to me.
Okay, Nate is asking, what research and design software do you recommend? I basically recommend whatever everybody else in your company is using, which for you, in not really being in that position, you're going to have to use whatever your team is using, because otherwise there's something happens and you're ill, or you can't come in for a day, and people have to be able to go in and do and get to your work and manipulate it if necessary. So it really pays for everybody on a team to be using the same thing. And there are so many good tools out there right now. I'd say try out some of the freebie or really, really cheap ones just to understand how the tools work. But they basically do the same stuff. And so they drag and drop design elements and assist you with visual design and things like that. And so as long as you've gotten some skill with any of them, you're gonna move easily to the one that you need to use for a job.